It's fascinating to look at the origins of a series like Devil May Cry, since the series itself has a heavy legacy that has gone on to influence so much. For years after the release of the original game, Devil May Cry became a sort of standard for the action genre, a reference point that would be endlessly compared with other efforts. To this day, the style and mechanics of Devil May Cry are still used as a base when trying to dissect new games, simply because of how much of an impact the series has had, and how widely that impact is understood. Yet when you hear how it all started, it's amazing that any of this happened at all. Devil May Cry is a careful concoction of passionate ideas that had to adapt to a more suitable format with a guiding hand to help steer the way forward.
Let's rock, baby.
Devil May Cry.
What have we got here?
Devil May Cry did not start as Devil May Cry. Before working on the defining game, Hideki Kamiya directed Resident Evil 2, a critical and commercial hit. Such success is ironic considering Kamiya doesn't particularly like horror games. In an interview with UK newspaper Metro discussing the Resident Evil 2 remake, Kamiya plainly stated that he doesn't enjoy being frightened, so working on a remake isn't something he'd want to do. In that sense, Resident Evil 2 wasn't Kamiya's ideal project. Yet he was chosen by Shinji Mikami, the director of the first Resident Evil, to work on a sequel. Kamiya stated on Twitter that Mikami labeled him a dark horse, someone who would either fail spectacularly or be a huge success. Of course, Mikami choosing Kamiya ended up being the right call, but Kamiya himself remarked that he was so caught up in being the director, he didn't even get to enjoy the job. The struggle of bringing Resident Evil 2 to life was ultimately worth it. Not only did the game do well, but Kamiya proved himself, earning confidence from Mikami, a strong mentor figure. Such faith is demonstrated by Mikami's instructions as Kamiya began laying the groundwork for a new Resident Evil title. In an interview with IGN, Kamiya says that Mikami gave him the absolute freedom to make the game he wanted, and to throw away anything with no limitations. With a distaste for horror and a newfound level of creative control, Kamiya did indeed make something very different. So different, in fact, that Mikami knew that it would be better as its own thing rather than carrying the Resident Evil name. Speaking with IGN, Mikami said it took him 3 months to convince Kamiya to change the title. If early Resident Evil focuses on generating horror through limiting available resources, Devil May Cry is in many ways obsessed with style. More specifically, an unapologetically brazen style that not only emphasizes strength, but uses that strength in creative ways. The game's core aesthetic can be traced back to the influences behind its main character, Dante. Kamiya said in an interview with CVG that he was inspired by Cobra, a shonen manga series, and like the titular character of that manga, Dante fights with a smirk. Every aspect of Dante's character was drilled down to be as smolderingly cool as the team could possibly make him.
Whoa, slow down, babe.
Being cool isn't just loud and attention-grabbing decoration for Devil May Cry. Every element makes an effort to justify its own attitude. Part of the reason Devil May Cry was initially so successful and retains so many fans today is because of how authentic it can feel. In the opening cutscene, Dante gets impaled to a wall with his own sword and has a motorcycle thrown at him. An incredible amount of intensity and chaos happens within minutes of starting the game. The cutscene not only sets up what kind of ridiculous action is ahead, but after playing the game, you learn that such a scene isn't overselling anything. If Dante is a wisecracking demon slayer who almost never sweats a fight, the systems underpinning Devil May Cry push as hard as possible to support that portrayal through gameplay that fits his character. One of the chief ways it does this is through player rankings, including the stylish rank earned through combat, as well as the rank received at the end of a mission. Although it is possible to just skim through to the end, the game goes out of its way to reward those who are more conscious of how they're fighting. The player is rated based on how quickly they complete missions and how many red orbs they collect. Taking damage and using items negatively affects the ranking. Plus, how stylishly a player dispatches enemies determines how many orbs they drop, making it easier for better fighters to obtain a high rank. Earning a higher rank at the end of the mission results in earning a greater number of bonus red orbs. Red orbs are precious since they're used to buy items like health upgrades, as well as new moves for weapons. A wider array of abilities makes it easier to be stylish, but new players may just as well find themselves gravitating toward items, considering how difficult the game can be. The difficulty can be seen even with the first boss, Phantom. The giant molten spider erupts pillars of lava from the floor, quickly shoots fireballs from its mouth, and swipes with large pincers. Each attack cleaves off a chunk of health, which can result in a quick and embarrassing death for the unprepared. Devil May Cry's inherent difficulty makes it worthwhile to put in the effort to play well, and try to earn red orbs, since players naturally want to give themselves as many advantages as possible. Combat emphasizes nuance instead of brute force, and the more time someone takes to understand the tools at their disposal, the stronger they'll be. Secret missions emphasize this approach even further. Hidden throughout levels are specific challenges, such as defeating a certain number of enemies within a time limit, or only having one attempt to take on a particularly strong foe. Without a doubt, Devil May Cry focuses on combat, and fighting is what you spend the most time doing. But because of the stylish ranking system, there's a drive to master even the smallest battle, preventing the onslaught of encounters from ever getting dull. However, combat is not the only element, and there are traces of Resident Evil still present, most notably the gothic horror setting, as well as times when certain items are needed to open the way forward. There's also a story that, while not elaborate or expertly written, does earnestly try to add depth and relatability to Dante, and the situation he finds himself in.
There was a war between the human world and the other, the underworld.
Dante's entire life revolves around his father Sparta, a demon who stood up against his own kind and fought for the sake of humanity. Sparta fell in love with a human woman named Ava and had two children, Dante and Virgil. Dante now hunts demons in pursuit of finding those who killed his mother and brother. One day, a mysterious woman named Trish drops into Dante's shop seeking help. She informs him that Mundus, Emperor of the Underworld, has been resurrected and is trying to gain control of the human world. Dante's mission is to stop Mundus, but throughout this journey, his family and their history remains a focal point. Powerful demons that Dante kills remark on his power and how similar it is to Sparta's. One particular demon, Nello Angelo, is revealed to be Dante's brother, Virgil.
Humans, what sweets. You should know better than to trust a stranger. Your presence has become a hindrance to my master's bloody scheme. Now die!
Trish even gets Dante to show sympathy and forgiveness. She was created by Mundus and betrays Dante, but he still finds it within himself to save her because she looks so much like his mother. She goes on to repay this kindness by saving Dante and giving him the strength he needs to finally defeat Mundus.
How much longer are you going to keep zapping? Come out and show yourself, Mundus!
Devil May Cry doesn't spend an abundance of time developing the relationships between characters, and the overly dramatic scenes typically lack any real emotional punch. One scene became particularly infamous when Dante cries that he just wants to fill Trish's dark soul with light.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
Yet, the core ideas that Devil May Cry presents, especially how large Sparta looms in Dante's life, and the strained relationship between Dante and Virgil, would go on to become defining aspects of the series, and serve as a foundation for the stories that eventually followed. The eventually is very important because the immediate follow-up is nothing short of a monumental disappointment. Perhaps the key to understanding why Devil May Cry 2 is so bewilderingly off is to look at its development. Instead of having Kamiya work on a sequel to his own project, Capcom had a completely different director take the helm. Kamiya didn't even know the game was being worked on until a planner from another group approached him asking to see the scenario and design document for Devil May Cry. When asked why, the planner told Kamiya he was working on the second game. Speaking to 1UP, Kamiya recounted how he was confused by the abrupt news, and he was almost worried about being fired. In the same interview, Kamiya speculated the decision was made because Capcom didn't want to have an intellectual property reliant on one person. The company didn't realize that Devil May Cry is what it is precisely because of the specific people that worked on it. At one point, development of Devil May Cry 2 was in such bad shape that an unnamed director got pulled off the project, and Hideaki Itsuno, who had previously directed titles like Power Stone and Rival Schools, was asked to step in. The troubled development and lacking awareness of the first game's meticulously considered design are both immediately apparent in Devil May Cry 2, which seems to only take the most superficial aspects of its predecessor. The sequel again focuses on style, even going as far as partnering with the Italian clothing brand Diesel. The brand promoted the game in Japanese Diesel stores, and Devil May Cry 2 features unlockable costumes with Diesel designs. The two playable characters, Dante and Lucia, can also run along walls, allowing for even flashier movement than what's possible in the first game. Looking cool means very little when there's zero reason to do it though. It's not just that the difficulty is dumbed down, but rather that it's dumbed down to the point that it's almost entirely uninteresting. A good majority of enemies and bosses can be swiftly dealt with by just mindlessly blasting away with default ranged weapons. You hardly need to worry about positioning since there's almost no danger at all. Targets don't even need to be on the screen for players to point, shoot, and obliterate. Another equally simple option is just to activate Devil Trigger and mash away. Beyond the difficulty, the missions are just tedious to get through, occasionally taking place in large areas, but not putting enough in those areas to make them interesting. There's even an underwater mission in Lucia's story that's way too long and ends with a miserable fight as you're still submerged. While underwater, movement is restricted and attacks are slowed, but no creative challenge is presented to compensate for taking away the basic and essential joys of Devil May Cry. The first Devil May Cry also has underwater sections, but they're merciful by comparison. That's not to say Devil May Cry 2 entirely lacks good ideas. Instead of needing to go into a menu to equip a new ranged weapon like before, players can do so in real time. It's also the first appearance of the Bloody Palace game mode, which basically consists of large waves of enemies that must be defeated as you ascend from floor to floor, trying to get as far as possible without dying. Bloody Palace would go on to be an essential and deeply loved mode for the series, appearing in every Devil May Cry game from here on out. Another improvement is that, unlike DMC1, players can reselect older missions after beating them. What doesn't work is having a second playable character, although the idea of having multiple characters is an interesting one, and it would be utilized in other Devil May Cry games down the line. This game's implementation leaves much to be desired. Playing as either Lucia or Dante feels roughly the same, partially because of the lower difficulty, but primarily because they both fight in nearly the same way, with the same capabilities.
Well, what have we here?
The two characters are also underwhelming from a narrative perspective. Devil May Cry saw Dante reckoning with the legacy of his father, but in Devil May Cry 2, there isn't nearly as strong of a motivation for him to be there. Arius, a businessman, is looking to acquire the power of Argosax, who was once the Demon King of the Underworld. Dante is enlisted by Lucia and Mathieu, someone whom Lucia considers a mother, to stop Arius from achieving his goal. Throughout the entire story, Dante doesn't develop in any meaningful way, nor does the player learn valuable information about him. Lucia seems poised to fare a little better, considering she actually has a strong connection to Arius. He created her, and this information is sprung on her suddenly, generating considerable self-doubt. Unfortunately, the story really doesn't go beyond this, offering no substantial information about her history. Devil May Cry 2 has what feels like an outline, rather than an actual story.
You seek my death.
Die!
It's tough putting much of the blame for Devil May Cry 2 on Hideaki Itsuno, who tried to salvage a mess instead of getting to work on something belonging entirely to him and his team. Such a chance eventually happened with Devil May Cry 3. In an interview with US Gamer, Itsuno said that rather than taking the feedback from 2 and focusing on that, he wanted to make something that was his own, treating 3 as a fresh start since the first 2 games were over and done. Taking the series in a new direction was certainly a monumental undertaking. In the same interview with US Gamer, Itsuno describes Devil May Cry 3 as probably the most difficult Devil May Cry game he's worked on. He attempted to use his history with fighting games and incorporate that knowledge into the gameplay.
Welcome to hell! Please accept my gift. Don't be humble. Just take it. After all, we're buddies, aren't we?
When Itsuno talks about wanting Devil May Cry 3 to feel like it dramatically mixed things up, it's much more than a director fondly recalling past work, and really serves as an apt description. Devil May Cry 3 is the earliest game in the Devil May Cry story, showing us a younger Dante at a point when he hasn't even given his legendary demon hunting shop a name. Combat undergoes a radical evolution thanks to styles, which allow for far more creativity and flexibility than in the previous games. Players still have an ever-expanding arsenal and can learn new abilities for weapons, but that's taken even further with styles, which each emphasize a different aspect of combat. The original 4 styles available at the beginning of the game can be leveled up through repeated use, expanding their capabilities and available moves. Trickster provides better evasion both on the ground and in the air. Swordmaster allows for a wider array of melee attacks. Gunslinger adds more versatility to ranged weapons, and Royal Guard enables the player to block and parry, building up energy that can be released for higher damage. Later on, Dante also acquires the Quicksilver style, which allows him to slow time at the cost of consuming the Devil Trigger gauge, and the Doppelganger style that also costs Devil Trigger but creates shadow copies of Dante who mimic his moves in battle. Styles make such an impression because of how thoroughly they affect the rest of the game. A new weapon is now not just interesting on its own, with its own move list and specific purpose in battle, but it's also modified by either the Gunslinger or Swordmaster style, depending on if it's a ranged or melee weapon. Using Trickster may make a boss easier to avoid, but Swordmaster could potentially allow for more ways to keep up the pressure. Styles are so powerful that they can't help but warp your playstyle, while also greatly encouraging more variety and experimentation. Such curiosity in combat is what Devil May Cry built its identity on, and styles are a perfect expansion of that fundamental aspect. Even with styles, Devil May Cry 3 isn't lacking when it comes to new weapons. A couple of key examples include Nevin, a guitar that violently blasts electricity when played, as well as Agni and Rudra, twin blades carrying the powers of fire and wind. If Devil May Cry 1 is about Dante dealing with the history of his father, Devil May Cry 3 is an exploration of the rivalry between Dante and Virgil. The power-hungry brother lures Dante to a large tower that suddenly shoots forth from the ground. Virgil does this because he wants Dante's half of an amulet, which, when combined with the half he already has, will open a way to the demon world where the power of Sparta lies. What's especially effective about Virgil is he crushes Dante fairly early on, offering up a rare moment of weakness for a character we're used to seeing handle almost any situation with relative ease. The player faces off with Virgil 2 more times throughout the story, culminating in one of the most intense and difficult fights in the entire series. Having to work up to that point allows Dante to be just a bit more relatable than he's been before. It also brings in new characters who share their own troubled relationship. An odd man named Arkham, and Mary, who adds depth to Arkham and ends up being tragic in her own right. Arkham is Mary's father, who sacrificed his wife in an effort to seek power. He uses Virgil to obtain the might of Sparta. Mary is on a quest for vengeance, not unlike Dante in Devil May Cry 1, carrying a burning drive to murder Arkham. Yet the audience is given a fair amount of time to see her struggle with that vengeance, selling the anger and sadness that she wrestles with. Mary eventually sheds her past and abandons her birth name, adopting the new name, Lady.
Mary.
Don't ever call me that again. My mother was the only one who could say my name.
In 2006, a special edition of Devil May Cry 3 released with many notable additions, not the least of which is Virgil as a playable character. This special edition also includes Turbo Mode, Bloody Palace, additional boss fights, and tweaks to the game's difficulty. DMC3 takes a character that embedded himself into gaming culture, not unlike a Lara Croft or Solid Snake, and shows us the early days that formed such an iconic figure. It feels in many ways like the rounding out of an identity, which is true of the entire game. It uses the foundation of DMC1 and expands upon its level design, combat, and storytelling in logical ways. The development team perceived DMC3 as the end of an arc. Speaking with the website Kizo, producer Hiroyuki Kobayashi said that Dante had grown and reached a completion stage. Now, they wanted a new character to appeal to a wider audience. Nero, became that new character, adding a fresh layer to Devil May Cry. DMC2 was a first attempt at including a new playable character in the core game, but it never felt fully realized. Nero immediately makes sense. He feels intentionally evocative of other well-established Devil May Cry characters. He's visually a smart mix of Dante and Virgil, with striking white hair, a flowing blue coat, and a prominent ornate sword. Yet Nero is much more than a mere rehash, carrying an angsty and naive expression as well as a glowing blue arm. Nero very much belongs in the world of Devil May Cry, which is important because he not only introduces Devil May Cry 4, but he is the sole playable character for the game's first half. Such a structure places a heavy burden on Nero, not only because he's a new character, but also because DMC4 was the first Devil May Cry game to appear on something other than the PlayStation 2 or PC, launching on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 in early 2008. Much like Styles and Devil May Cry 3 nailed the core series tenets of bombast and depth, Nero's arsenal follows a similar mindset. While Nero doesn't have different forms that can be switched between like Dante, his tools have a level of mastery that, while not necessarily required, are strongly incentivized. The Devil Bringer is all about manipulating space. With a push of a button, the arm shoots out, either pulling the enemy toward Nero or bringing him to them. The new mechanic elegantly tackles two problems at the same time, serving as an immediately useful option for newcomers while also enabling elaborate combos for more experienced players. Grabbing enemies is great for separating them from a pack and keeping them in the air for extended damage, or the arm can be used to zip toward a boss between its attacks. Within the opening hour of the game, the Devil Bringer's utility is simple to understand and play around with. The Devil Bringer can also buster enemies, grappling them at a specific time for heavy damage, such as when they're in a vulnerable state or when the player wants to counter an attack. It really can't be overstated how ridiculously satisfying landing a buster can feel, thanks in large part to the visual and audio feedback of the attack. Even with the most basic buster attack, the screen slightly shakes and Nero slams the hapless victim with a thud. Nero can even use the buster against bosses, turning what was once menacing into little more than a toy. Another new mechanic of Nero's comes from his sword, the Red Queen, and the Exceed system. Nero can rev up the sword, building up charges that expend during follow-up attacks. These attacks are enhanced, giving moves additional properties such as greater damage or range. While Nero can slowly rev up the blade during battle, a far more efficient way to build charges is to hit the rev button immediately following an attack, which instantly builds a charge. Mastering Exceed takes equal amounts of precision and practice. Although it's possible to finish the game while ignoring it entirely, a whole new dimension of combat opens up for those that do engage with it. In combat, Dante's abilities still revolve around styles, but those styles receive far better implementation. The initial 4 styles from DMC3 return, but this time they can be changed on the fly in the middle of a fight. In the previous game, styles could only be changed at a statue or between missions, making it easy for a player to settle with the style they're comfortable with, especially if they want to reach a style's maximum level. Although there were plenty of benefits to experimentation, the stifling limitations didn't drive players to try new things. Now in DMC4, there's little consequence for trying a diverse approach, and considering the differing demands of encounters throughout the game, variety comes naturally.
So I'll cut to the chase.
In addition to the freeform style switching, Dante can still swap between melee and ranged weapons on the fly as well. The versatility between all of these elements allows combat to feel immensely personal. With so much freedom allowed in how you fight, over time you start to feel as though you develop your own personal style. While certain approaches are more effective in specific circumstances, it often feels as though the biggest limiting factors are your own skill and creativity. Dante's personality in DMC4 fits perfectly with how he plays. He's more mischievous and confident than ever, leading to some of the most elaborate, humorous, and energetic cutscenes in the series' history.
The price to pay for power?
Humans. They are but stubborn and foolish.
If DMC3 features Dante finding his way, then DMC4 is Dante at the top, comfortable with who he is and informed by past events. He contrasts well with Nero, who is much younger and as a result, more brash and headstrong. Nero has plenty of reason to rush into the fray, though. During a ceremony, Nero witnesses the leader of his order, Sanctus, get murdered by Dante. The sudden violent act leads Nero to chase after the Redcoat Demon Slayer. He uncovers why the island town they're in is being invaded and also learns the secrets of the Order along the way. Nero's concerns are very immediate. Having the group he's allied with be thrown into chaos so quickly is intriguing. His worry for love interest Kyrie is also understandable. Yet what makes the story of Devil May Cry 4 frustrating is that it has enough elements to be interesting, but does nothing or next to nothing with those elements. Nero's relationship to the Order is never fully elaborated on in a convincing way, making it difficult to care about what happens, and the same is true of his relationship to Kyrie. There's not enough development between the two of them to make the audience fully understand why they care so much for each other. For as fun as Dante is on screen, his motivations for being wrapped up in the events of DMC4 feel a lot more removed than the looming family history of DMC 1 and 3. The end result is a story that can be easily recounted on paper, but lacks real impact as it's unfolding.
You got a jacked up notion of fair play, pal. And it's beginning to piss me off.
The structure of the game is equally, if not more, disappointing. Playing through the first half as Nero, you experience a good variety of stages and encounters. Yet when you take control of Dante, you're forced to retread very similar ground, running through the same environments and fighting the very same things. It's not quite an exact repeat of Nero's stages, but it's a lot more similar than it should be, sapping away some of the excitement. Some of the level ideas, while creative, aren't even especially great in the first place, one of which requires the player to hit a dice and move across what is essentially a game board. Depending on the space the player lands on, different events trigger, such as having to clear the room of enemies before proceeding. The whole event ends up feeling more drawn out and tedious than it needs to be, and the fact that it shows up more than once doesn't help. In an interview with Polygon, Itsuno revealed that the repetitive structure came as the result of a harsh reality. Itsuno believed that after Devil May Cry 3, he would get to work on Dragon's Dogma, but suddenly had Devil May Cry 4 thrust onto him. Yet despite a new generation of hardware, he was given basically the same budget as DMC3, leading to what Itsuno describes as cut corners.
Things always gotta be complicated.
In 2015, roughly 7 years after the game's original release, DMC4 received a special edition in a similar vein to DMC3's special edition. It adds quite a lot, including Virgil, Trish, and Lady as playable characters, taking the total number to 5, the highest yet seen in a DMC game. The special edition also includes an extra-fast turbo mode, as well as the legendary Dark Knight difficulty, which has a vast increase in the number of enemies. Both of these features were previously exclusive to the PC edition. While the special edition doesn't fix the most common criticisms with the game, it does significantly bolster the game, making it more appealing overall.
When the people you're supposed to trust most turn out to be demon scum, your eyes really do open up to evil everywhere.
Every single Devil May Cry game has gone in a dramatically different direction than what immediately came before it. At this point, the series had also successfully established itself across 2 different generations of hardware. But in 2010, 2 years after Devil May Cry 4, Capcom would announce the biggest change yet. At the Tokyo Game Show that year, the world got their first look at a full reboot of Devil May Cry called DMC. It's a reveal that pulls no punches, immediately feeling sharply different. Dante has short, black hair and a thin build. The trailer is loud and stylish in its own way, though opting for more grime than usual. Being developed by Ninja Theory, known for games like Heavenly Sword and Enslaved, DMC made a big impression in a way it never quite had before. The new direction caused concern from longtime fans, partly because of just how different it is. In an interview with Eurogamer, DMC producer Alex Jones said that Capcom Japan approached Capcom America with the task of exploring a new direction for Devil May Cry. There was no demand for the new game to be a sequel, and according to Jones, people at Capcom America had a positive experience working with Ninja Theory. To Jones, Ninja Theory made a lot of sense, saying their past work demonstrated a logical fit. After working with Ninja Theory for 5 to 6 months, the idea of a reboot sprung up naturally. In the same interview, another producer, Motohide Ishiro, said that a driving motivation for the project was to expand the appeal of the series as a whole. Despite the success Devil May Cry had seen, other action games on the market were selling far more, prompting a change of course to reach greater heights. Tamim Antonitis, director of the game, said that there was a desire to make DMC feel current, since many other games came out that were informed by Devil May Cry. It meant that DMC would establish a new style, influenced by popular culture. If feeling new is one of the primary objectives of DMC, it succeeds and aggressively carves out its own identity down to the smallest detail. The world Dante explores regularly contorts, shifts, and erupts in all sorts of different ways. Words flash on the walls and floors, issuing taunts like "closer" as Dante runs on by. Basic enemies like the Stygian feel somewhat evocative of the classic Devil May Cry marionette, but have their own gross and oozing personalities. Bosses are often ridiculous spectacles, as are the arenas they inhabit. The very first boss, the Succubus, is an absolutely revolting sack of a monster, practically bursting with disgusting liquid. You and the boss dash from one section of the room to another as it crumbles all around. Outside of big moments like boss fights, DMC also feels quite different when it comes to basic combat encounters and moving through levels. DMC includes far more platforming, and new tools make that increased emphasis more enjoyable. Dante can easily switch between two different modes, Angel and Demon, each with its own advantages. In Angel mode, Dante can dash across large gaps as well as pull himself toward platforms and enemies. In Demon mode, the enemies and platforms come to him. Very quickly, the platforming involves chaining these elements together, such as leaping forward and then using the push and pull mechanics to manipulate yourself and the environment in order to get to a desired destination. Angel and Demon mode play huge parts in combat as well. In addition to fundamental Dante elements like the Rebellion Sword and the Ebony and Ivory dual pistols, each mode comes with its own special weapon. Angel mode turns sword attacks into scythe attacks, which are both quick and cover a broad range. In Demon mode, sword slashes turn into brutish axe swings that are both slow and powerful. The enemy design requires players to make use of these different weapons, and in the best fights, you're required to alternate between them rapidly. The switching of modes feels somewhat similar to switching between weapons in past games, but because enemies require certain weapons a bit more specifically, it allows DMC to feel like it's operating in a familiar space, but in its own way. As with everything else in DMC, the story plays with similar characters and ideas as other Devil May Cry games, but takes them in a different direction. Humanity is being completely controlled by demons, and while demons in previous games were generally a very straightforward threat, in DMC, they're cunning manipulators. They rule behind the scenes and ensure that humans remain docile. Over time, Dante discovers that his lost twin brother Virgil leads a group known as the Order, which is intent on stopping the demon's control. Although all previous Devil May Cry games feature elaborate cutscenes, the focus of the cutscenes is shifted in DMC. Instead of prioritizing action, DMC sometimes heavily focuses on exposition. In Devil May Cry 3, players do see a younger Dante and uncover what the rivalry is like between him and Virgil. Yet, the way that rivalry is primarily explored is through battle. In DMC, the audience is given a specific look at Dante's childhood, the tragedy that overtook his family, and the relationship between his mother and father. The way Dante and Virgil interact is more casual. There are also key differences to characters that change them pretty dramatically. Instead of Dante being the offspring of a demon father and a human mother, here, his mother Ava is an angel, which plays heavily into the story. In Devil May Cry 3, Virgil's intentions were immediately clear, making him an adversary right from the start. The Virgil in DMC initially seems well-intentioned, only for him to eventually take a turn. Despite continued discontent from some fans, DMC generally reviewed very well, and in a financial result press release, Capcom stated that DMC enjoyed stable popularity in overseas markets and posted solid sales. In 2015, a definitive version of DMC released on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. It includes all previous DLC, new costumes, and also fixes some criticisms of the original games. One of the biggest improvements is that while the original game runs at 30 frames per second on consoles, the definitive edition runs at the series standard of 60. DMC was not only a grand departure, but it was also the last new Devil May Cry entry for a good while. The future of the series remained unclear until E3 2018, when Devil May Cry 5 burst onto the scene, becoming the first new game the series had seen in roughly 5 years. Devil May Cry 5 is both a return in several aspects, as well as a bold step forward. Hideaki Itsuno, director of Devil May Cry 2, 3, and 4, came back to helm the project. Devil May Cry 5 also continues the story after Devil May Cry 4, even featuring both Nero and Dante as playable characters once again. However, DMC5 isn't merely a repeat of the past, featuring substantial changes to Nero, as well as including a new playable character, V. The mysterious V plays much differently than any other character before him, controlling multiple pets simultaneously while avoiding danger himself. Although the characters are extremely different mechanically, Itsuno wanted to bind them together under two common themes: setbacks and awakening. Speaking at the 2019 Game Developers Conference, Itsuno clearly explained how each character faces their own personal struggles, yet then has a moment where they push through and conquer. Itsuno was particularly inspired by television shows and movies where the hero has a sudden surge of power leading to triumph. The sense of triumph is equally tangible in the gameplay, and Itsuno wanted a non-binary sensation of success. Put another way, he wants the player to feel themselves slowly but surely getting better without giving up. To facilitate this and maintain motivation, the player has multiple options to revive upon death. Among these options is using a different amount of red orbs to survive, the same currency used to purchase abilities and items within the game. The more red orbs the player spends to revive, the more health and devil trigger they'll revive with. Itsuno describes this as the player betting on themselves, and by guessing how much assistance they'll need to get through a particular challenge, they'll blame themselves rather than the game when met with failure, since they're the ones making the bet. It's just one example of how DMC5 tries to bring as many players into the fold without ruining the feeling of joy that comes from overcoming difficult moments, which is a feeling that Itsuno believes is absolutely vital. The pride that comes from surmounting hardship is exactly what led to DMC5's creation. In a post-release interview with Polygon, Itsuno describes a conversation he had with Capcom's chairman Kenzo Tsujimoto, where Itsuno said that he wanted to either make DMC5 or Dragon's Dogma 2. The reason he chose DMC5 is because that although action games had evolved, with scenarios similar to what you see in movies, there was a lack of what he considers pure action games. The core appeal of these games is having challenges where you don't necessarily overcome them the first time, but you practice to eventually defeat them and obtain the satisfaction of achievement. Due to the lack of these pure action games, Itsuno felt it was the perfect time for DMC5, whereas Dragon's Dogma 2 is something that could happen later. Whether it was the perfect time or not, Itsuno's decision certainly paid off. DMC5 has sold more than 2 million copies. Where exactly the series goes from here is unclear, but at least for the moment, Devil May Cry appears to have hit a jackpot.
All right, time to kick some ass.